Hi, friends. Will Davis Jr. here with your good news today. We're pushing our way through the second chapter of First Peter, and we hit one of those crescendo moments today. There was a crescendo moment in chapter 1 when he said, "Be holy as I am holy." Well, in chapter 2, there's another one. It's one of these places where the grass is so deep, you kind of push the lawnmower and have to back up and go over the grass a few times lest it choke you because it's so deep and profound. Well, here we are. Having been told to pursue the pure milk of the Word because we've tasted and seen that the Lord is good, Peter now offers insight into our spiritual legacy here on earth. While we are here on earth as elect exiles, we are, verse 4, as you come to him, a living stone, rejected by men, but in the sight of God chosen and precious. Verse 5, you yourselves, like living stones, are being built up as a spiritual house to be a holy priesthood, to offer spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. I love this passage. I've taught on this passage most of my adult life, and it's one of our foundational passages for how we view ministry at Austin Christian Fellowship in what is a holy priesthood, which we're discussing now, and in verse 9, a royal priesthood, which we'll discuss, I think, next week. I just want to deal with the first part of this verse today and the next part of the verse tomorrow. There's too much here to try to push through. So he says, as you come to him, as you approach him, Jesus, and he calls Jesus a living stone. It's a metaphor, but it's taken from the context of the cornerstone idea in the Old Testament and the architecture of the Old Testament. When the temple was built and other great buildings were built, the architects and builders would take great care of finding the stone that was set in the corner on the ground, which was set the direction both for its height and its breadth and width. The cornerstone was critical, and they'd spend a lot of time looking at stones, casting them away, looking at stones, and that's not it. This is the one. We can make this one work. And it says, you come to him as a stone, a cornerstone, that's living. He's building this idea of a living, breathing, functional building, functional organ. Remember, we think of church and see steeples. We think of church and see addresses. We think of 4 points in our beautiful building God's given us there on the highest point in the city of Austin. That's a church building. It's not the church. It's a place the church might meet and do ministry and do care. It is not the church. The church is us. It's a living, breathing, functioning, dynamic organism that is not limited to a space or an address. If the church has an address, it's you. That's all it is. Okay? But I want you to get this. This is really, in one way, heartbreaking piece of scripture here. He says, you come to him, the living stone, rejected by men. The word rejected there is packed with meaning. It's the idea of putting something to a test with the intention of finding it to pass the test. So you go to test something thinking it's going to do fine and it's going to pass and prove to be what it's supposed to be. But in essence, it falls short of the expectation and is thus cast away. That's what the word rejected means. So men looked at God as a foundation for their lives and found him wanting. Men looked at Jesus Christ as that which might be worthy of their belief and worship and went, nah, I don't want that, and cast him aside. He didn't meet their expectations. He didn't do what they wanted him to do. And so they cast him aside. That's what the word rejected means. But by God, Jesus Christ is chosen and accepted. The building that man wants to build doesn't need Jesus. The building that God is building is based on Jesus. He's the cornerstone. So first, verse 5, you yourselves, because you're coming to him. And it's emphatic. You, the church, you yourselves, you, no one else. You in contradistinction to anybody else on the earth. You yourselves, like living stones. Same word that was used for Jesus. He's a living stone. We're living stones. Now picture this. Are being built up as a spiritual house. Picture all these faces, all these names, all these people. Just limit it right now to Austin Christian Fellowship, or those of you who are watching. All these wonderful folks, their faces, their hearts, their lives, their spiritual gifts. That's the spiritual house. He's drawing off the imagery of the temple in the Old Testament with his cornerstone. But the building being built is not a physical building in Jerusalem. It's a universal building, where the foundation of that building is Jesus Christ, and our belief in him makes us living stones into a house that is spiritual. And then he says to offer sacrifices to him as a holy priesthood, which we'll deal with tomorrow. So you are part of the greatest structure in history. You're part of this organization known as the church, which is a spiritual, living, breathing, dynamic organism that is a spiritual house. It's a spiritual structure. Doesn't have an address. It may meet in places, but it's living and breathing, and thus it cannot be contained. It's all over the world. It's on every corner of the globe, and it's alive and well. And its foundation is the man who was rejected by his peers as not meeting their expectations, but chosen by God. And that's all that matters. And that's good news. I'll see you tomorrow.